The flashing red and blue lights painted streaks across the wet pavement as Officer Travis Cole tightened his grip on his holstered weapon. The call had been urgent, an armed suspect matching the description of a wanted criminal. But when he arrived at the dimly lit gas station, the only person there was a black man standing by his car, hands in his pockets. Something in Travis's gut twisted. This was too easy, too familiar. And then, without thinking, he made a choice that would change everything. The radio crackled in the squad car, breaking the silence of the late-night shift. Officer Travis Cole barely listened. His eyes were locked on the lone figure outside the gas station. The suspect. He stepped out of his cruiser, boots crunching against the damp asphalt. A slow mist rolled through the empty street, making the neon glow of the gas station sign flicker like a heartbeat. The man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a dark hoodie, stood still, his gaze locked on Travis with an unreadable expression. Travis's hand hovered over his gun. "Step away from the car. Hands where I can see them," Travis ordered. The man didn't move. "I said, I'm not armed." The voice was steady, calm, unafraid. Travis narrowed his eyes. "That's so." The man slowly raised his hands, fingers spread wide. "You got the wrong guy, officer." A gust of wind sent a crumpled newspaper skidding across the pavement. Travis's pulse pounded in his ears. Something about this man set him on edge. Maybe it was the defiance in his posture, the way he didn't cower like others did. Like he'd been through this before. Then Travis spotted something on the ground near the man's feet. A black duffel bag, partially unzipped. A glint of metal inside. "Turn around." "Hands on the hood," Travis said, pulling out his cuffs. The man exhaled, shaking his head. "You're making a mistake." Travis ignored him, grabbing his wrist. But as he reached for the cuffs, the radio on his shoulder buzzed with a new dispatch. "Be advised, suspect in armed robbery apprehended across town. Suspect in custody." Travis's grip froze. The words slammed into him like a punch to the gut. He looked back at the man he had already made up his mind about before even stepping out of the car. But it was too late. The sirens were already approaching, and Travis had just set something in motion that couldn't be undone. The wail of approaching sirens cut through the night air. Travis's grip tightened on the man's wrist, his mind racing. He had seconds to decide his next move. The call over the radio had confirmed it. This wasn't their suspect. But the damage was already done. Backup was on the way, and if they arrived to see this scene, questions would be asked. Questions Travis wasn't sure he had good answers for. The man's jaw clenched as he met Travis's gaze. His eyes weren't filled with fear, just quiet, simmering anger. "You still gonna cuff me?" he asked, voice low. Travis hesitated. He could let go, pretend this never happened. But that bag, his eyes darted back to it. The glint of metal inside had been unmistakable. If there was a weapon, he could still justify the stop. The suspicion, maybe even the force he was about to use. "You're carrying," Travis said. It wasn't a question. The man didn't blink. "Look in the bag." Travis's fingers twitched near his holster. He had been in situations like this before. He knew how they could go. One wrong move. 1 second of hesitation. And yet, the sirens grew louder. A second squad car screeched to a stop nearby. 2 officers emerged, hands already on their weapons. "What's going on, Cole?" one of them called out. Travis didn't answer immediately. He had a choice to make. "Found him outside the gas station," he finally said, his voice steady. He had a bag with him. The man's jaw tensed, his nostrils flaring. "You should probably tell them what's inside before they make their own assumptions," he muttered. One of the officers, a younger guy named Simmons, stepped forward, gaze flicking between them. "Let's take a look," he said, moving toward the duffel bag. Travis watched as Simmons knelt and unzipped it. A second later, he froze. A silver badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights. A paramedic's uniform was neatly folded beside it. The metallic glint Travis had seen? Not a gun. A trauma kit. Travis's stomach twisted. Simmons slowly turned his head toward Travis, confusion flickering in his eyes. "This is medical gear," he said. Travis's mouth went dry. The man's eyes were locked on him now, hard and unflinching. "I told you," he said. A long silence stretched between them, tension thick in the air. The other officers waited, expecting an explanation. But before anyone could say another word, a voice crackled through the radio. "Officers be advised. Possible retaliation in progress. Shots fired 2 blocks from your location. armed suspects fleeing the scene. Travis exhaled, forcing himself to focus. The situation had just shifted. Whatever had just happened here would have to wait. There was another crisis unfolding nearby. But as he released the man's wrist and stepped back, Travis couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The tension in the air didn't dissipate as Travis stepped back. The man shook his wrist slightly, rubbing at the spot where Travis had grabbed him. His face remained unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, a challenge, a question left unspoken. Simmons was still crouched beside the bag, his confusion giving way to something sharper. The other officers looked between Travis and the man, waiting for someone to speak. But before anyone could, the radio crackled again. Shots fired. Suspects heading west on Lincoln. Officers, proceed with caution. Simmons snapped to attention. That's barely 2 blocks from here. Travis forced himself to focus. We move now, he said, pushing everything else aside. He turned to the man. You good to go? The man exhaled sharply. I was never supposed to be here in the first place. Travis hesitated, then nodded. Stay out of trouble. The man shook his head with a dry chuckle. That's not always up to me. Before Travis could respond, Simmons was already moving toward the squad car. The other officers followed, urgency cutting through the moment. Travis took one last look at the man before turning away and sliding into the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, and they sped off toward the scene. As they neared Lincoln Street, the radio chatter intensified. Suspects sighted, black sedan, no plates. Armed and dangerous. Travis's grip tightened on the wheel. The streets were dark, illuminated only by flickering streetlights and neon signs. Up ahead, movement. A black sedan swerved recklessly, tires screeching. There! Simmons shouted. Travis gunned the engine, closing the distance. But before they could get close, the sedan suddenly jerked left and disappeared into an alleyway. Simmons cursed. They're going to try to lose us through the back streets. Travis didn't hesitate. He took the turn hard, the squad car jolting as they followed. The alley was narrow, littered with dumpsters and debris. The sedan was barely visible, its taillights flickering through the darkness. Then, without warning, the sedan's driver's side door flew open. A man jumped out, sprinting into the shadows. Go after him, Travis ordered, bringing the car to a screeching halt. Simmons was already out the door, radioing for backup as he chased after the fleeing suspect. Travis turned toward the sedan, gun drawn. The driver was still inside, slumped over. Cautiously, Travis approached. Show me your hands. No response. His pulse pounded as he reached for the door handle, yanking it open. The driver collapsed sideways, a dark stain spreading across his chest. Travis barely had time to process it before he heard something. A scuffle, a grunt of pain. Then a gunshot. His head snapped up. Simmons had chased the suspect into the darkness, but now the sounds of struggle were growing fainter. Travis's instincts kicked in. He ran. His boots pounded against the pavement as he followed the sounds, his pulse hammering. He turned a corner, spotting movement ahead. Simmons was on the ground, struggling against the suspect who now had a gun pressed against his chest. Travis raised his weapon. Drop it. The suspect didn't move. His breathing was ragged, his hand steady on the trigger. Travis took a step closer, his own grip tightening. Don't make this worse. For a moment, it seemed like the man might surrender. But then his eyes flickered toward something behind Travis. And Travis felt it, an eerie awareness creeping up his spine. Someone else was there, watching. He barely had time to react before a voice, cold and calm, spoke from the shadows. You're in the wrong fight, Officer Cole. Travis didn't turn immediately. His instincts screamed at him to keep his gun trained on the suspect, still holding Simmons at gunpoint. But that voice, smooth, deliberate, sent a cold wave through his chest. From the corner of his eye, he caught movement in the shadows. A figure stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, as if knowing he had all the time in the world. The dim alley lights barely touched his face, but Travis could see enough, a scar cutting down his cheek, sharp eyes that held no fear. Lower your weapon, the man said, his voice eerily calm. Or your partner's done. Simmons let out a sharp breath, still pinned under the first suspect's weight. His eyes flicked to Travis, waiting for him to act. Travis' mind raced. There were 2 of them, one holding Simmons down, the other lurking like a predator in the dark. His grip tightened on his gun. He could take a shot, but if he missed even slightly, the scarred man took another step closer. "I know who you are, Officer Cole," he continued. "And I know what you did today." Travis stiffened. "What are you talking about?" A slow, knowing smirk crossed the man's face. "The guy you stopped earlier. The one with the duffel bag. You don't know who he is, do you?" Travis stayed silent. "Didn't think so," the man said. "You almost locked up the wrong guy." Again, Travis felt his pulse thud against his skull. Again, the man tilted his head slightly, watching him. "You're still playing the wrong side of the board, officer. You don't even see the whole game yet." Simmons grunted beneath the weight of the man holding him down. "Travis." The scarred man didn't even glance at him. "But you will. Soon." Travis' jaw clenched. "Let him go." The man chuckled under his breath. "Not yet. First, I want to see something." Then, in a movement too fast to track, he reached into his pocket and tossed something onto the ground between them. A single worn photograph. Travis' breath caught as his gaze fell on the image. A younger version of his father stood in uniform, shaking hands with someone, a man with deep brown skin, dressed in civilian clothes but standing tall. His face was different, younger, but Travis knew those eyes. They belonged to the man he had stopped earlier. His blood ran cold. The scarred man smiled. "Now let's see what kind of cop you really are." Travis couldn't move. His grip on his gun tightened, but his arms felt heavier, like the weight of that photograph was pressing down on him. The face staring back at him from the worn image was undeniable. The same man he had slammed against the hood of his cruiser hours ago. The same man he'd accused of carrying something illegal. The same man who now, impossibly, stood frozen in time beside his father. Simmons groaned under the pressure of the suspect's knee. "Travis, what the hell is going on?" Travis barely heard him. His mind was unraveling, piecing together fragments that didn't make sense. His father had never talked about this. Never once mentioned knowing a black man who, what? Fought beside him, worked with him, saved him. The scarred man in front of him seemed to be enjoying his confusion. "You starting to see it now?" he asked, his voice laced with something dark and knowing. "Or do you need me to spell it out for you?" Travis swallowed hard, forcing his voice to stay steady. "Who is he?" The man's smirk widened. "Ask yourself why your old man never told you." A slow chill crawled up Travis' spine. The photograph in the dirt was proof of something, but what? That his father had secrets? That the man he'd spent his life admiring wasn't who he thought he was? The suspect pinning Simmons down pressed harder, making him gasp. "We're running out of patience here, officer," he warned. Travis knew he had seconds to make a decision, but everything felt wrong. He was trained for standoffs, for high-pressure moments where a single wrong move could end in bloodshed. But this wasn't just a criminal threat. This was something deeper, something personal. "You framed him," Travis said suddenly, his own voice surprising him. His own accusation thrown back at him. "Didn't you?" The scarred man didn't flinch. "I didn't have to," he said. "You did it yourself." Travis' stomach twisted. His own actions, his own assumptions, had led to this moment. And now, the man in front of him was testing him. The scarred man stepped closer. "You want to fix this?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "Then put down your gun and listen." Travis' finger hovered over the trigger. Every instinct screamed against it. But somewhere, buried beneath years of training and blind certainty, was a different voice. One whispering that maybe, just maybe, he was about to learn the truth about everything. He took a slow breath. His hands shook. And then, he lowered his gun. The scarred man smiled. "Good," he said. "Now let's talk about your father." Travis's mind raced as the sirens grew louder, a wailing reminder that time was slipping away. His grip tightened around his holstered gun, his fingers twitching with indecision. Everything he had been taught, everything he believed about justice, about duty, was at war with the truth standing right in front of him. Simmons thrashed beneath the man's hold, his breath ragged with rage. "Do something, Travis," he shouted. "You gonna stand there while this criminal attacks a cop?" Travis flinched at the word. Criminal. It was automatic, wasn't it? The way the system labeled men like him before they even had a chance to speak. The man before him didn't look afraid, didn't plead for his life, didn't beg. He was waiting. Not for mercy, not for sympathy, but for Travis's choice. The headlights of an approaching patrol car cut through the night, painting streaks of blue and red across the cracked pavement. The radio on Simmons's belt crackled with voices. More officers were coming. This would be out of his hands in seconds. "Let him up," Travis said, his voice low but firm. The man hesitated. That what you really want, officer? Travis nodded slowly. Yeah, but you need to trust me. Simmons snarled. This is a mistake. The man let go, stepping back with deliberate caution, his eyes never leaving Travis. Simmons pushed himself up, shaking with barely contained fury, his hand immediately reaching for his own weapon. Travis moved before he could think. His hand shot out, gripping Simmons's wrist, stopping him cold. No, he said, his voice sharp, cutting through the chaos. Simmons glared at him. You protecting him now? Travis swallowed hard. I'm saying we don't know the whole story. Backup is here. Let's handle this the right way. Simmons's lip curled. And what's that supposed to mean? Travis didn't answer. Because he wasn't sure himself. The other squad cars screeched to a stop. Doors flung open. Officers flooded the scene, guns raised, voices barking orders. The air pulsed with tension. Travis lifted his hands, stepping forward. Everybody stand down. The officers hesitated, glancing at Simmons, then back at Travis. The man beside him exhaled slowly, watching the shift unfold, measuring every move. One wrong word, one wrong move, and this night would end in blood. Travis could feel it, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The line between right and wrong had never felt thinner. The air was thick with tension. The officers who had just arrived stood in formation, guns drawn, waiting for someone to give the order. Every second felt stretched, the space between breaths growing heavier. The flashing red and blue lights cast eerie shadows on the pavement, distorting faces, turning men into silhouettes of judgment. Simmons pulled his arm away from Travis's grip, his face twisted with rage. You lost your damn mind? He hissed, his voice sharp enough to cut through the static of the police radios. He assaulted an officer, and you're standing here protecting him? Travis didn't respond right away. His heart was hammering against his ribs, but his mind was locked onto the man standing next to him. The man wasn't panicked, wasn't defensive. He was still, watching, measuring every movement around him like he knew exactly how this could go wrong. Lower your weapons, Travis said, forcing authority into his tone. No one moved. The ranking officer, a stocky man with a hardened face, stepped forward. What the hell is going on here, Montgomery? His sharp gaze bounced between Travis, Simmons, and the man at the center of it all. Why are we getting reports of an officer down? But you're just standing here like this is a damn negotiation. Travis swallowed hard. He could feel Simmons's fury beside him, feel the weight of the entire force's eyes boring into him, waiting for him to make a move, to fall in line. But then the man finally spoke. You want to know what's going on? His voice was even, controlled, but there was something in it. Something deeper, something carrying the weight of years. You've got a cop here who's about to let the truth get buried, and another who doesn't know which side he's really on. Travis stiffened. The other officers turned toward him, their grips tightening on their weapons. Simmons scoffed, stepping forward with a sneer. Truth? What truth? That you resisted arrest? That you attacked me? The man shook his head, his expression unreadable. I didn't attack you. I defended myself. And I got a real good reason why I don't trust cops like you. Travis caught the shift in Simmons's posture, the way his jaw tightened, the way his fingers twitched near his holster. This was about to spiral out of control. Everybody needs to take a breath, Travis said quickly, his voice cutting through the thick tension. We are not turning this into something it doesn't need to be. Simmons let out a bitter laugh. You hear yourself right now? He gestured toward the man. This guy's playing you, Montgomery. You want to throw your career away over some thug sob story. A flicker of something crossed the man's face, something that made Travis's gut twist. I saved a cop's life once, the man said quietly. Didn't think twice about it. Risked everything to pull him out of a burning car when no one else would. That man had a family, had kids, and I did it because it was the right thing to do. Travis's breath caught in his chest. The man turned slightly, his eyes locking onto him. That cop's name was James Montgomery. Silence. The name hit Travis like a freight train. His father's name. His pulse roared in his ears, drowning out everything else. The street, the officers, the flashing lights, all of it blurred into nothing. No, it wasn't possible. He felt his throat go dry. What did you just say? The man's expression didn't change. Your father. I saved his life. And now his son is standing here trying to figure out if he's going to let history repeat itself. The world around Travis tilted. This wasn't just a routine call anymore. This wasn't just another night on the job. This was personal. And now, everyone was watching to see what he would do next. Travis felt like the ground beneath him had cracked open. His father. His name. The weight of those words pressed down on him, heavier than the badge on his chest. He tried to swallow, but his throat was dry. Simmons took a step forward, his voice sharp and mocking. "Oh, give me a break. You expect us to believe that? That you, some nobody, saved Montgomery's father? That's convenient." He turned to Travis, his lip curling. "And you're actually hesitating? You've known me for years, Montgomery. We went through training together. We've got each other's backs." Travis barely heard him. His thoughts were a whirlwind, fragments of old conversations with his father flashing through his mind. His dad had never talked much about his time on the force, but there had been a story, one he'd told only once, late at night when Travis was still a kid. A fire, a crash, and a stranger who pulled him out before the flames swallowed the wreck. "You don't believe him, do you?" Simmons snapped, his patience unraveling. Travis's pulse thundered. He turned back to the man, his voice tight. "Prove it." The man studied him for a long moment before he exhaled. "Your father carried a watch. Silver, worn on the edges. He told me it was a gift from his wife, said it was the only thing that mattered to him if he didn't make it. When I pulled him out, he grabbed my arm and made me swear I'd get it back to her if he didn't survive." He paused. "I put it in his hand myself before the ambulance arrived." Travis's stomach dropped. That watch. He'd seen it every day growing up. His father never took it off, not once, not even when it stopped working. Simmons scoffed. "You think he couldn't have made that up? You really gonna let some convict get in your head?" The man's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "I'm not a convict." Travis met his gaze, something cold settling in his gut. "Then why the hell were you running?" The man hesitated just long enough for the doubt to creep back in. "Because I know what happens when someone like me gets accused of something I didn't do," he finally said. "And I know what happens when a cop like him," he flicked his chin toward Simmons, "is the one making the accusations." Travis saw the muscle in Simmons's jaw twitch. "You don't know a damn thing about me," Simmons snapped. The man shook his head. "I know enough." Travis could feel it. The shift in the air. This wasn't just a routine stop gone wrong. There was something deeper, something bigger happening right in front of him. Simmons was still gripping his gun like he was one wrong word away from pulling the trigger. The other officers were tense, waiting for a command. And standing at the center of it all was a man who claimed to have saved his father's life. Travis had a choice to make, and every second that passed made it harder to know which one was right. Travis's hands felt clammy against the grip of his gun. His instincts screamed at him to step back, to reassess, but the weight of the situation kept pressing in. His entire life had been built on the idea that the badge meant something, that it stood for truth, for justice. But right now, standing between a fellow officer and a man who might have saved his father's life, he wasn't sure what the truth was anymore. Simmons took another step forward, his voice sharp. "We're wasting time. This guy ran from us. That's enough proof of guilt. Are you really going to stand there and entertain this nonsense?" Travis barely heard him. His focus was on the man in front of him, on the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes shifted, calculating. He wasn't afraid. He was cautious, like a man who had seen this play out before and already knew how it would end. "Tell me what's really going on," Travis said, his voice low. The man exhaled, shaking his head. "You already know, deep down." Travis did. He had seen it before. The way stories twisted, how the wrong person could be painted as guilty before they even had a chance to speak. He had ignored it, justified it. But now, it was right in front of him, forcing him to face something he had been too afraid to question. Simmons was losing patience. His hand twitched toward his holster. "Montgomery, stop messing around. Either we take him in, or we put him down right now." Travis turned sharply. "Put him down? Since when do we execute suspects in the street?" Simmons narrowed his eyes. "Since when do you question your own?" Silence hung between them. The other officers shifted uneasily, their fingers near their weapons, waiting for a cue. The city noise seemed distant now, muffled beneath the pounding in Travis's ears. The man, still holding his hands up, glanced between them. "You already made your decision, officer. Now the question is, how far are you willing to go for it?" Travis tightened his grip on his gun, every nerve in his body on edge. The weight of years of loyalty, of training, of belief in the system he had sworn to uphold, came crashing down all at once. And then Simmons moved. Fast. Too fast. His gun came up in a blur, aimed directly at the man's chest. Travis had seconds to react. And in those seconds, everything changed. Travis didn't think. His body moved before his mind could catch up. His hand shot out, knocking Simmons's arm just as his finger tightened on the trigger. The shot rang out, loud and sharp, splitting the night air. The bullet missed its target by inches, shattering the window of a parked car behind them. Glass rained onto the pavement, and for a split second, there was nothing but the echo of the gunshot and the stunned silence that followed. Then chaos erupted. The suspect, if he even was a suspect, took the opportunity and bolted. His feet pounded against the asphalt as he sprinted into the darkness of the alley. Travis barely registered Simmons's furious curse before the officer turned on him, shoving him back with enough force to make him stumble. "What the hell are you doing, Montgomery?" Simmons's voice was a growl, low and full of something dangerous. "You just let him go." Travis steadied himself, his heart hammering. "You were about to kill an unarmed man." Simmons's nostrils flared. "You don't know that. You don't know anything about him." "I know he didn't have a weapon." Travis's voice was firm, but inside, doubt gnawed at him. He didn't know the man's story, not yet, but something deep in his gut told him Simmons wasn't after justice. This wasn't about the law. It was about power, about control. And Travis had just stepped in the way. More officers arrived, drawn by the sound of the gunshot. They hesitated at the scene. Simmons glaring, Travis standing his ground, the suspect nowhere in sight. "Which way did he go?" one of them asked, eyes scanning the alley. Travis hesitated. He knew what would happen if they caught him now. Simmons wouldn't let him make it out alive. Simmons turned to him, his voice tight with barely restrained anger. "Montgomery, you're going to tell them where he went. And we're going to finish what we started." Travis swallowed hard. A choice was hanging in front of him, clear as day. He could give up the man's location and let Simmons take him down, let things play out the way they always had. Or he could do something unthinkable. He could go after him himself. For the first time in his career, Travis realized that the badge on his chest didn't mean justice if the people wearing it weren't willing to fight for it. He made his choice. Without a word, he turned and ran. Not after the officers. After the man. Travis sprinted through the alley, his breath coming in sharp bursts as he followed the sound of hurried footsteps ahead. The man was fast, weaving through the maze of back streets, but Travis was determined. He wasn't chasing him to arrest him. He was chasing him to save him. Up ahead, the man reached a chain-link fence and scrambled over it with practiced ease. Travis was only seconds behind, gripping the metal tightly as he hoisted himself over. His boots hit the ground just as the man turned a corner into an abandoned lot. "Wait," Travis called out. "I'm not here to hurt you." The man hesitated, his silhouette pausing beneath the dim glow of a street lamp. Travis took a slow step forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I swear, I just want to talk." The man's chest rose and fell rapidly, his eyes darting toward the street, searching for an escape. But something in Travis's voice must have convinced him. He didn't run. "Who are you?" His voice was wary, edged with years of distrust. Travis took another step closer, his own heart pounding. "I'm Officer Montgomery." "What's your name?" The man hesitated before finally answering. "Isaiah." Travis nodded. "Isaiah, listen to me. Simmons was going to kill you back there. You need to get out of here before he finds you again." Isaiah's expression darkened. "Why should I trust you? You're one of them." Travis exhaled. He couldn't argue with that. For years, he had worn the same uniform, patrolled the same streets, followed the same orders. But something had shifted tonight. "You're right," Travis admitted. "I was one of them. But I can't stand by and watch this happen. Not anymore." Isaiah studied him for a long moment, his jaw tight with lingering suspicion. "Then why help me?" Travis's pulse quickened. He wasn't sure how to explain it. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the realization that he had spent too long looking the other way. Or maybe it was something deeper, something he had ignored for too long. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I do know this. Simmons won't stop until you're dead. And I won't let that happen." Isaiah's eyes flickered with something unreadable before he finally nodded. "Then what do we do?" Travis glanced over his shoulder. The distant sound of sirens was growing louder. They were running out of time. "There's a safe house a few blocks from here," he said. I know someone who can help you disappear." Isaiah didn't need convincing. Together, they slipped into the shadows, moving swiftly through the empty streets. By the time Simmons and the other officers arrived, the lot was empty. Hours later, Travis sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. His career was over. He knew that now. But as he stared at his reflection in the rearview mirror, something settled in his chest. For the first time in years, he could look himself in the eye. He had done the right thing, and that was all that mattered.